Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reigeter, and today I'm joined by a licensed clinical therapist and the owner of Innate Virtue Counseling, Earl Martin. In this episode, Earl explores the impact of trauma on marginalized communities with a focus on the LGBTQ+ community and shares insights on how therapists and loved ones can foster a supportive and affirming environment. Earl, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I just want to check in. How are you really?
I am doing really well. It's my birthday month. We are a few days away from spending some time with my family. I'm not a big Christmas person, but I love spending time with my family. So getting to see the little ones, seeing my family, seeing some friends that are also in town. So I'm in a really good space. Yeah.
Happy birth month. That's so
Thank
exciting.
you.
I
Yes.
love getting to spend time with my family. However, I'm not a big holidays person. I don't
Mhm.
know why. I'm just not. And then it's that conflict, right? Of I love spending time with my family, but the
Mhm.
pressure of it being holiday, right?
Especially Christmas, because Christmas it's so commercialized.
Uh,
And I love it for the little children, but my favorite holiday is Halloween.
oh, I love it.
Just because I just love to dress up and be different for a night with my friends, and my friend throws an amazing Halloween party every year at her house. But when it gets to Christmas, I'm always kind of like, do we skip to my birthday every time? She'll say that, but it is what it is.
No, it is very commercialized and it's very hard when I don't know, I'm at that age where I don't necessarily I appreciate gifts, but I'm not like super excited where I was when I was younger. Like, yay, I get to open presents. Now I'm like, oh, now I feel like, did I get the other person a good enough gift? And then all those intrusive thoughts come in, and I'm like,
Mhm. No, that's honestly it. I was talking to I was actually talking to my own therapist. We were talking about the holidays and how I was like everyone is like, oh, let me get you this gift, I'm gonna give you this. And I joked around and said, yeah, because we kind of just give each other money at this point because it's like I don't know what this person wants. And I said, we're all just trading money back and forth. So it's like we don't have to do any of this. We could just do our family time karaoke games like we normally do, but I also get like my aunts and grandma, they're like, I can't not get y'all gifts. Y'all are all grown now, but it just doesn't feel right if I don't get you something. It's just like, okay, you just continue the cycle.
I love it. A Christmas karaoke?
Yeah, so my family, we've been the last few years doing different things. So we always love game night. For the last year or so, we did just like put up some karaoke YouTube videos and get into character. And so I did Little Shop of Horror, one of my favorite Broadway plays. I did one of those. We did some Missy Elliott, Bohemian Rhapsody. We do all kind of. We're always doing something. We're a loud bunch, so.
I love it. I tried to get Christmas karaoke to be a thing for a while. Well, I tried to get karaoke to be like an anytime the family was together thing for a while.
Uh-huh.
And so I had a karaoke machine. And I would just perform I Knew You Were Trouble for the full thing. And I would dramatically like fall to the ground, full
Yes.
karaoke, like
Yes.
full choreography. No one really appreciated it. I should bring that back this year.
Bring it back. My family, so we're jokesters. Yeah, I did a full spin, fall to the ground dramatic. There's this Missy Elliott song like I Can't Stand the Rain where she comes out in this black trash bag. My sister was performing the song and I was like, oh my God, I know I'm all got trash bags here. So I went to the kitchen, threw some shades on and came out. It's a whole thing.
Love it. That's such a great way to bond with your family and to
Mhm.
enjoy a time that can feel so heavy and difficult for so many different
Yes.
reasons.
Yeah, because the Christmas looks way different from childhood, like you kind of brought up. And then just when people start getting older and people are passing, and it just your traditions change, and there's one hour so like there's two things to be true. Like, yes, we love change, we love that traditions can shift and evolve, but there's also some like grief of like, oh, this is not the same when we were younger, and it was all my cousins, and everybody spent the night at this house, and so you're right, it can be mixed.
Yeah. And a big thing that's been coming up for me lately is during the holidays, it used to feel like life was so magical and there was so much joy and everything good was happening. But as I've gotten older and the world's not as magical as it was when I was a kid, it feels a lot different. Like you don't
I don't believe in it as much as I used to believe in humanity and life and all the good. This yesterday I was at I talked about this with you prior, but the Broward delegation legislative meeting, the public hearing, and I'm sitting there to the senators and representatives, like begging them to fight for me and people like me who are struggling with their mental health and need support, need access to resources.
Mhm.
And it just felt so exhausting to have 2 minutes to tell someone that I need them to care about my life and my existence. And then it really hit me how many communities where people just won't even give you the platform to stand in front of them.
Yeah.
And it's not even begging to care in the way that I'm begging to just give me resources. It's begging not to take things away from me. And that,
Things you should just naturally have a right to.
what you just said, it's the right to humanity. It's
Mhm.
really, I think, devastating as a grown up to see that the world is not Santa Claus coming to town and rainbows and
It's not
butterflies.
Disney.
Not, not Disney.
Not Disney.
And it's so frustrating to see that, as a future therapist, as someone who's starting to learn a little bit more about what I don't know, realizing how much I don't know
Yeah.
and how many things that might seem obvious once I start to get awareness. I'm like, why did I think how trauma may look differently in different populations? Because why would I think differently based on my own experience if I was
Yeah.
never introduced to a different perspective? And
Yeah.
that's been really frustrating as well, wrapping up the semester. I'm like, how many things did I not know that we're not talking about? So I know in our conversation today, we're going to talk about trauma in marginalized communities, particularly the LGBTQ plus community. And I'm excited for that because I need to be educated and so many others. So to begin, can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, I guess coming up with a basic definition for what trauma is.
Yeah. So trauma honestly is a distressing experience. And unlike any other experience, it's one of those experiences when it becomes trauma where it just continues. And it's kind of like you brought up intrusive thoughts. So like, but it's like constantly in our mind. We might have some avoidance to it. And I'm kind of getting into like the definition of PTSD, but we might be having some arousals, which could be like I am now shaking, I'm fidgeting, my heart is racing, I'm getting sweats because these memories are coming in. I could be avoiding the spaces that relate to that trauma. So, like, let's say if I got in a car accident, I am like now avoiding cars. I don't want to go on this road that this accident happened in. But trauma really is just a distressing experience, and that can look different for everyone. Everyone's window of tolerance is different, and so like I could have a twin or a sibling, and we have experienced we just witnessed a major car accident. They could be completely unfazed, right? They can bounce back and they're totally fine. But for me, it could have been a very traumatic experience that could evolve into some more, which could be like post-traumatic stress disorder. But honestly, it's just those distressing experiences that are emotionally distressing for us.
It's so important to talk about how it can look different for everyone because,
Hmm.
like you just said, the car accident example, I had a teacher in my trauma class. So in my trauma class, my teacher had explained a situation she was in where her family was robbed at gunpoint.
Mm.
And all of us automatically went to that must have been so traumatic. How that impacted you? And she's like, it actually didn't.
Yeah,
She's like, I didn't perceive it as a traumatic experience in the way that my family members did. And
right.
for her, it's a memory. For them, it was like a nightmare.
Yeah. And that's I'm like I did intimate partner violence for about 7 years, working with children who are child witnesses of domestic violence, and then I switched over to the adults. And so many times I would interview the parents before I went and assessed their child, and they would say, "Oh, I don't think they're impacted," or "I think this child is like they're smiling and they're perfect, and they're not really talking about it. They're not impacted." And they're like, "But this child is constantly talking about it." And I said, "The child that's talking about it is the one that's actually processing." The child that's now perfect and everything be in order and they're like, I gotta make all A's, I gotta do this, like that perfectionism. I was like, they probably have the most impact from that trauma, but they're trying to have this control and it's like, if I'm not talking about it, I avoid it, it didn't happen. So like I constantly you will see kids and with that child's presented with some PTSD and some major trauma impact and this child talking about it, right? They're processing, but they might not need as much therapy. So you're right, like it can be completely different for each person. And you just never know until you start talking about it and kind of doing some digging.
And that's why it's so important to be talking about it. A lot of times we want
Mm-hmm.
to avoid an experience that may be traumatic because we don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing we should never do is avoid conversations because
Mm-hmm.
people are suffering in silence.
And those things come back. I always say everything comes to light. No matter how much you try to suppress something, and yes, your brain might repress it, but when you're like intentionally trying to suppress it, it's gonna come out. The body keeps the score. It keeps every part and experience we've ever had. And it's the moment you catch on it, it's like why you have people that say like, "Oh, I feel like that just happened to me yesterday." When it comes back up, and it's like, "Yeah, your body just pressed pause on it."
Yeah, the body keeps score. I was talking with my cousin the other day about
Hmm.
the loss. So this time of year, I really don't like because there was so many losses, and we were
Yeah.
talking about the loss of my uncle, and he was like, for her, it feels so long ago. And I was like, and sometimes it does for me too. And then it feels like yesterday. And then there's those days where I'll wake up in the middle of the night in tears, like this
Hmm.
all just happened all over again. Or I'll see the police sirens and I'll just like flash back into that moment.
Yeah.
It can look so differently for all of us, and we may not realize it until we're in it. And I didn't even see that as a traumatic experience because
Yeah.
I was involved but not involved.
Right.
So it didn't feel like I was close enough to it for it to have impacted me the way it did. So it was a long time where I felt people are like, so like, how do I word this? Um, I wasn't there, but I was on the phone leading up to it. I pulled up with the cops. So I was it's just outside of it, but I
Yeah.
wasn't physically present in that moment. And for me, I didn't think of that as a traumatic experience because I wasn't physically present at that moment.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until having conversations with people and actually reading the DSM a little bit and doing my homework, that I realized that how it was impacting me. That when I was having these nightmares, I wasn't
Yeah.
just being dramatic. I wasn't just looking for attention, kind of the way people like to word it toward me. People say, well, you weren't there, so it wasn't a big deal to you, that invalidation. I realized how much it was impacting me because the outside noise and what I was telling myself was that
Mm-hmm.
you're fine, almost like you're fine, get over it.
Yeah. And that's like the one we don't even get over grief, right? Like grief is forever. I tell people I truly believe like grief is love transformed, right? And so when we have major grief, we had a lot of love for that person. And the way that someone leaves, that can also impact us. And you were on that phone, that you were there, like coming up there. Secondary trauma is real, vicarious trauma is real. Like there's therapists where if we're not in our own therapy while we're doing therapy, you hear these stories, you can get that secondary trauma and that vicarious trauma because I'm not there, but I have enough empathy and enough attunement to you in this story that I feel like I'm there, right? And so that's I hate when people tell that to people like, well, get over it. We don't get over anything. Now we can get through it, right? By working through it, but getting over it is not a thing.
I'm going to start quoting you to people. I love it. Grief is love transformed, and we don't get over, we get through. Because
Mm-mm.
it can often be so invalidating. And then I think what I'm learning as I'm starting to enter the therapy room is I may not even realize that I could be invalidating based on not recognizing how impactful a situation could be for someone.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've been I want to say anxious about is how do I know when I am letting something sit in a healthy way and I'm letting something sit in a way that's not validating them, right? It's like validating, but then starting to work through, or if it's just validating, sitting with. Does that make sense what I'm saying, by the way?
No, yeah. So like how do I support my client but still validate the experience enough where I'm still pushing them to try to heal through it? Is that what you're kind of getting to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting into words.
No, yeah. I think for me, it's like holding that space, right? And so you're gonna have times where you're with clients where they're like, and I tell them all the time, you're driving this ship. You're the captain. I'm just here to help you go in the directions when you're ready. Now, at times, I tell clients I'm also like a pusher, so I will see like, hey, are we want to address this, or do we need to sit in a little bit more? Because you have to sit in the feelings. You got to sit in whatever emotions come up before we can really process it. And like that's why I really love EMDR because sometimes we know when we have these traumatic experiences, your emotions are so elevated that you're not able to process the trauma or the memory in a healthy way or in a way where we can get more clarity because your emotions are too high. But through it, where we can kind of, all right, let's kind of turn the volume down, if you will, on the emotions. Let's desensitize it, and not desensitize it in a way where I'm cutting off, but let's turn the volume down on these emotions so I can have enough clarity to process what's going on without being drowned out or overcome. Or as I tell my clients, I'm telling them, we're being hijacked. Let's not get hijacked by the emotions, right? The emotions don't run us. We run them. Like we can't control when emotions come up, but we control how we respond to them. And so those when you're working with clients, you're kind of another time I say we gonna mess up at times. I tell people all the time, you're gonna get it wrong at some point, and it's okay. The biggest thing in those moments is to name it. Hey, I didn't get that one right, or hey, I don't know everything. Sometimes people think, oh, you're a therapist, you know it all. I don't. I know some, I know a good bit, but I don't know everything. If I didn't, like nobody is a textbook. No person is the same. Every experience is different. And so I can just show up best for that person and still like recognize like, hey, this is the key goal that you've identified. But let's take some moment. Let's sit in this a bit. And when you're ready, and I might even say like, I think we can maybe take a little step. Are you willing to take that step? If it's too much, guess what? We can step out. You still have choice here. So yeah.
You are so amazing. I wish this is how like my teachers were talking to. I love my school. I don't want to be like, oh, my teachers aren't great. They are great, but I wish that these were the conversations we were having, and even with my
Yeah.
supervisor, because it is so. I mean, I walk out of sessions sometimes. I'm like, I'm the world's greatest therapist. Like, I'm so excited, ready to buy myself a trophy. But like, I have those days where I'm like, did I do that right? And what would that look like if I didn't? Or did I miss a piece of the experience because I'm looking at it from my own perspective?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's not enough conversation where, I mean, just the way you said it was still validating and encouraging. It's okay to ask the client, like, how can I support you? What is this like for you? Because if
Hmm.
I don't know, I don't know. And it's not fair to make these assumptions. Another point that you said that I loved so much is we're not a textbook. And even if we were the textbook, a lot of times the textbook gets it right because it's written from one perspective, one point of view.
Right.
And that's
Some
very,
cultural lens is missed in that side.
yeah. Yeah, but it's very challenging when you don't know what you don't know. I had this whole epiphany yesterday
Uh-huh.
when I was recording another podcast episode. I'm talking about neuroaffirmative care. And I was like, I never thought about that because my teachers never talked about it. I was never exposed to it. So, and I was like, I can't believe that I don't know this.
Yeah.
And that I was like, wow, I don't know anything. And I need to start going out of my way to make sure I'm continuously trying to learn what I don't know.
Yeah.
Scary.
Well, I think also gives yourself grace because things are constantly evolving. So like when I was in grad school 10 years ago, it's so much more out there. And I think that's the part about when you are in school, and you'll probably hear your professor say this a lot. I'm like, go through that experience, do an internship that's different. Because sometimes you go into these programs and you're like, I already know what I want to do. I want this niche, I want this population. And they'll always tell you, well, try something that you never thought you would have done. Maybe try hospice or maybe try this because it's giving you a different experience and it's also adding to your toolbox. And there's no way professors can teach you everything because things are constantly evolving. So it's kind of like they give you I call it like I'm gonna give you your basic toolbox and you get those skill sets and then you go out to your internships and your first job and you learn those skills and you keep switching up so you can evolve. But there's no way you can know everything. And that's why we do tell our people like, when you do kind of find a niche or specialty, it's okay to like, this is my niche. And yes, I'm still learning. I'm doing like my CEs and my continuing education, but you can have a niche and then you should also have a network of people that have other different niches that you can learn from, but also like, I know that I am may not be best fit for you, and I can connect you with this person who is, because there's no way you're gonna know everything.
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's
give
so
yourself grace
good.
too.
Oh, thank you. I said because I'm learning and I'm willing to learn. And I think that knowing it's so important to know that we're not always going to be the best fit.
Hmm.
And I think I had one teacher. Oh, there was this one class I had, and my teacher's like, "What would you do in this situation?" And I was like, "I'd refer out. I would refer out because I know I don't have the skills or the awareness to be the best person in a situation yet.
Yeah,
When you don't necessarily know what to do, and there's a chance you could be more harmful than helpful." So I was like,
absolutely.
I would refer out. I'm like, you just started yelling at me that you can't do that. And I was like, but I swear that's right to do. Like, I felt like that was the most ethical option. So I think there's also a lot of
Yeah.
fear that on what to do. But as someone who is willing to constantly learn, I
Hmm.
think it's important to be willing to ask questions and be able to admit that, like, I don't know everything. So with our conversation today, I've taken my trauma classes. I listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts. I know there's so much I don't know, and I'm really excited that we're going to dive into
Yeah.
what trauma looks like in marginalized communities, specifically
Hmm.
how can trauma, I guess, what are examples of different types of trauma that the LGBTQ plus community may face?
Yeah. So I'll start off with like what is minority stressors, right? I think that's the biggest piece. So minority stressors can include like racism, sexism, prejudice. It can look like homophobia, transphobia. So those are like stressors that particular minority groups experience that most would not, or they would have a blind lens to. They don't have a lens to it. And so like some specific to LGBTQ could be like family stressors. Is my family accepting? Is my family religious? And I have been told we don't support this. We don't support any type of anything that's outside the realm of like this is what homosexuals do. This is what we focus on. So like if you have those stressors of I can't date who I want, even if they don't even know that you're queer, but you've heard them make these like queer rhetoric and criticisms of the queer community, that will now kind of you take those beliefs on. So now you might be dealing with stresses of do I have some internalized homophobia, right? I've seen clients who I'm not this type of gay or I don't do this, but it's because someone along the line has shamed them enough or made them become ashamed of their own self that they put barriers with between their community. So those are stressors. You could have stressors such as experience discrimination in work, experiencing discrimination in your church. A lot of times people might think like, oh, they're gay, so they're not religious. It's like, that's not true. They could be very spiritual or religious or both. And when you have these encounters where I feel connected to God, but then I'm in this space where I'm told that God doesn't love me, right? That's a different form of minority stress. Education. If I'm in a school that is not supportive of my identity, or we're not even speaking about my identity. So let's say growing up in the South, sex education in the US is sadly just not the best. We've seen some growth, but if I'm in a sex education course and we're not talking about education around all sex, if we're not talking about education around safe sex and same sex relationships, that is a form of stress. I'm hearing this of don't have sex so you don't have a baby, or don't do this, or the only education I'm hearing is like don't have sex, you're gonna get HIV, right? So that fear mongering experience, those are some stressors. Interpersonal, my friend groups. Am I being seen in my friend groups? Am I able to show up authentically in these spaces, whether it's in work or with my family or my friends, those interpersonal relationships? Can I show up fully me without being judged? Am I now wearing a mask of what I think others want me to be? So I'm perceiving them perceiving me, but it's all wrong. And so like that can create so much stress. Like queer youth, LGBTQ youth are twice as much to experience panic disorders, anxiety, depression, because it's like that constant of, do I have the space to be free? And so, like those stresses, when you have so many eyes on you, I always tell people, those that are most oppressed usually can see the world for all it is. Like we talk about, like those rose lenses. People that are most oppressed typically don't have that because they see things for what they are. And so when other people are like getting that like that, I didn't recognize it. They're like, I didn't that. Like I could have been told you about that. But it's just because like that experience. Hmm.
It's so, I can't imagine. as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, I was so
Mhm.
confused in who I was and who I was supposed to be. I can't
Right.
imagine the added layer of, do people approve of me? Does my family approve of me? Am I still loved?
Mhm.
Why do I have different feelings than other people? Right? Why am I not lining up with the sex ed education? Right? And
Right.
the standard and what the textbooks say I should be. I think that has to be very, very frustrating. I can't imagine. I don't want to say frustrating. I can't imagine how that must feel because I know I was totally lost and confused on how I'm supposed to fit into this world where I fit into the
Yeah.
stereotype of what it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like when you add like that rejection piece or that fear of rejection, right? So we know rejection is hard in general. It doesn't matter who you are. But you add those layers and you have like constant moments of rejection. So if you're getting rejected from your family, and then you go to school and you're being rejected by your peers, and then you go out into society, you're experiencing rejection. All those things like build up, and if you don't have that person or that space that is coming in and affirming you of like, oh baby, you are okay, you are loved, that can really impact who you are. And that's why we have like so many LGBTQ youths, they have the highest rate sadly for suicide. And when you have that or homelessness, if you are being rejected, that stuff can have like major implications if someone's not coming in and wrapping you in love.
Yeah, and not having that validation of humanity, all
Yeah.
going back to humanity and feeling like you can't
Yes.
even exist as you are.
Yeah.
How may trauma appear or look like when someone is going through that?
Um, Disconnected, isolation. It would actually look angry, right? Sometimes, and this kind of jump into my days of dealing with extreme partner violence, we would have so many times where we would have law enforcement people or even like other workers like they always have an attitude. They're just always so angry. And I'm like, that's a learned response, right? I'm learned that anger gets heard. Anger puts up a protector. It puts a shield up. If I present anger, you are less likely to try me, right? You're less likely to nick or pick. Um, but a lot of isolation, that can look what we call like a hyper arousal. So they may look extremely vigilant. It can be standard like flashbacks, or let's say I have a friend that says if it's hysterical, it's historical, right? So what that means is we had this small inconvenience or disagreement, but their reaction is like 100. You're like, wait a minute, what is this about? That's something historical. That's tying to something. Um, so it can look like that. Let me see. Lack of focus. I think I said avoidance already. That exaggerated response, issues with concentrating, sleep issues. It's still those same things that follow under PTSD, but like not being able to connect, not having those social skills to feel like I can advocate for myself. So you can even see someone that appears very like docile in what they communicate or say. They may just like, I don't, it doesn't matter. Like in that learned helplessness, it can present as that. Because if I've had people constantly tell me what you say has no value, or I don't really care, I don't see you, you can start to take that on for yourself till you lose your voice. You lose your ability to advocate and speak up for yourself. So you just kind of appear docile or whatever happens, happens. So like all those things can present in different ways. Like trauma doesn't have one face. That's the other thing. So even those things I named, there's things I'm not named because it can present differently.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the statistic make so much more sense. The 4 times more likely to end their life when you're seeing how if people don't even validate you as a human being, of course you don't feel connected. How do you foster relationships that make you feel connected and supported when people around you have shown that they don't see you as a human being? They don't see you as someone who's worthy of having all of your rights. And
And I forgot to name. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
oh no, I was thinking like no wonder it's harder to build that connection, to feel supported, to feel
Yeah.
when you don't have that support system, you don't have that love, you feel like you can't even be you.
Hmm.
No wonder these numbers are so high.
And I want to add another piece. Control can be tied to trauma. So when you see someone that's very controlling, they have super rigid boundaries of it has to be this way, and the slightest inconvenience or the slightest perception of I'm losing can be a source of trauma because when you've had all these experiences where you've had no control over your life, no control of how people are treating you, and when you do get to a space where you've gotten that taste, that can be presented like there's no control, and it's like, but that's probably tied to something. When have you not had control in your life to make just like you said, like those natural human decisions that I should naturally be able to make for myself, but when I get into these spaces, it can look very bad or toxic or unhealthy, but it's because it's tied to something.
Yeah. I had one client who was very, very needs control to feel like the client can survive.
Mhm.
And I was saying that to my supervisor, and I was like trying to figure out how do I work on relinquishing control in a healthy way and building a healthy relationship with control. And she was like, well, did you ask her about trauma? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, a lot of time control can be linked to trauma. And I never realized how when life feels so out of control, like you said, of course you hold on to what control you can have so you can
Yeah.
make sense of the world.
Yeah. Trying to survive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. I guess let's start with for clinicians
Mhm.
who, right, we're going to go clinicians, then we're going to go to friends and family. But starting with clinicians, who may have someone from the LGBTQ plus community
Yeah.
come in and maybe don't even realize that they've gone through trauma. What are some ways that we can, I guess, bring it into the therapy room in a healthy way to be able to provide that support, that validation, and the tools needed?
Yeah. So one, I think it's just really seeing them and talking to them about their experience, right? So asking about dating. What has dating looked like? The same thing as you would ask your client that is heterosexual. I should be able to openly say that with someone that is queer. And so like talk to them about your first time dating. Did you have a space to experience openly being able to date? Going or you ever been able to talk to your parents like, oh, Michael asked me on a date today at school, and I'm coming in as Earl, right? But like, oh, Michael asked me on a date. Did you have a safe space to talk about that? So many times I have like this fun theory sometimes. I'm like, yeah, sometimes you'll see people that are LGBTQ, right, in their 20s, right? You might say like, oh, but they're dating wise, it's still sometimes like teen based because they didn't have those first. And this generation is so different, which I love for this new generation because they're getting to do so many things that people from my generation didn't get to do or work, had the safety to do, right? And so like you show that they come up and I didn't get to go like I didn't go to prom with a guy. I didn't go on my first dates until maybe my early 20s. And so you kind of see like that delay, but like having those candid conversations. Were you able to share your feelings with someone? Was your household safe to have open dialogue? Did someone affirm your identity? And when they like answer those questions, this is the activity I actually do in my sessions with my clients. I have them it's kind of like using like both sides of your brain. I have them write the question that I'm asking them in their dominant hand, and then in their non-dominant, I make them answer it. And we know if you're right, when you're non-dominant, it looks almost like childlike. I like to do this because it's like, let's do a checking in with your younger self. So I might ask them, did you feel safe as a kid? Write that down. And a lot of times they're like, okay, let me answer it. I'm like, oh, write it with your non-dominant, and I don't need a long answer. Like, just answer. Because sometimes when you start thinking too much, you try to come up with the perfect, like, oh, I want to wrap it up in a bow. It doesn't need to be pretty. So I'll ask, did you have someone affirm your identity? And a lot of my clients have the intersections of being black and brown, and then adding the intersection of raised in the South, and the intersection of I am also LGBTQ plus and all today. And so I'll ask, did you have representation? Did you feel loved? How did you see love expressed? How did you see conflict resolved? And so when I have them answer those questions, then we kind of go back and can give light to these situations because this is really asking like, have you had anyone ask you these type of questions? And then you can kind of dig from there because a lot of times also people don't recognize that some things were traumatic because it was in their mind, this was normalized. This is just my day to day, right? And it's not to make it seem like, oh no, you had a traumatic upbringing, but it is to bring light of like, that might have been normalized, but that doesn't have to be your normal today.
I love that because it doesn't have to look like what it has looked like. One thing
Mm-hmm.
you brought in though was intersectionality, because I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that's something we talk about enough either. So easy to make assumptions about what trauma may look like, or symptoms or experiences may look like in general for
Mm-hmm.
each community. But when you start looking at the intersections, it may look completely different. And everything
Yeah.
that we've thought we've learned is
Mm-hmm.
not if we don't ask the experience, if we don't make space for their experiences.
Yeah, because there's even marginalization within the LGBTQ plus community, right? Like if you look at our trans brothers and sisters, they experience a different type of marginalization, even though they're at the forefront of the fight since the beginning. And then when you add in that layer of being black or brown, right? There's marginalization with that, of like white LGBTQ experiences versus black LGBTQ experiences. Vastly different. So there's a lot of different layers to that as well. Because if you add that intersection of like, okay, I'm black and I could experience microaggressions, which is another form of minority stress. Um, I can't click my skin off. And then if I am gay, sometimes there are some people that can straight pass, right? But if you're someone that is more effeminate, like I can't just act or pretend, those are other different layers that you can experience around just experiencing hate. And so it's like I said, those intersections, there's this very convoluted, but that's why you got to have that space to allow people to be seen and heard. And like you brought up, willing to learn. That's the biggest piece. As a therapist, and that's for family, therapy, friends, peers, anyone you have to be willing to learn. And what that means is sometimes you got to be quiet, open your ears, ask good questions, right? Because sometimes people's questions are just based in curiosity, and that curiosity can be attached to some ignorance. But allow yourself to be open to hearing new things, not just about your perspective, which we know, but not everyone knows that.
And being willing to admit that you don't know everything.
Yes.
We'd like to think we do as
Mm-hmm.
human beings in general. And I always tell my family, I'm like, I know everything, I'm perfect. But we have to be able to get out of that mindset, especially when connecting with a human being. Just
Yeah.
in any way, shape, or form, knowing that you don't know everything, you don't know everything about someone's experience and the way that they perceived it. And back to what you said earlier, you could all be in the same situation and experience it differently. So never make assumptions. And that's the big thing I would like to do. So knowing that, don't make assumptions, be willing to admit that you don't know everything,
Mm-hmm.
willing to listen. And another thing you said earlier that I really love is learned responses and being willing to see which responses are learned and how we can begin to unlearn that behavior.
Yeah. And recognize, I think, put that pride aside to make a repair. Because sometimes the only things with the best intention and your impact was completely different from your intentions. And so when you're willing to make that drive back and make amends, recognize, like, even when you're in sessions, I think I brought up earlier, like, you're going to get it wrong. And you might do something in session that you get wrong. But when you're able to have enough courage to come back and say, hey, that last session, I realized I said something wrong, or I realized my intent on how I said something, but now that I left that session, I feel like the way it was delivered wasn't the correct way. Make that repair. Because even that is showing that client of like, oh, they saw me, or oh, they're willing to back up and make an apology, which some people just don't get. Like people have wronged them and no one's intentionally made a repair. And so that in itself even helps along with like can maintain that therapeutic rapport. But it also just shows like, hey, I'm human and I still see you.
Yeah. And if no one's ever done it before, they know that it's possible,
Yeah.
right? That it's possible for someone to care and to want to make sure that you feel heard and validated and seen and loved.
Yeah.
Really, and that not everyone out there is the same. I think
And
that's
I always close my sessions with my clients asking, okay, did anything not work for you today? And they were like, when they first hear it, they were like, huh? And it throws them off. And I tell them, it's going to throw you off because you're probably not used to it. But I was like, did anything not work? So that could be like, Earl, I didn't like how you said that. Or that intervention we just did. I don't know if I want to revisit that. That is your time to be honest. And it takes them sometimes a while to feel comfortable to be like, well, luckily I've been infected. They're like, no, I enjoy it and I love this piece. But having that space to be like, no, this is your time that you can critique or give me feedback or anything. because this is your session. And that also now embed them to like go out in the world and do that, which is like use your voice, advocate, learn that boundary or recognize like, hey, I didn't like that what that brought up for me, I feel fill in the blank. That teaches you like I can say it. So yeah.
It does. It really helps you take skills you're learning in therapy outside when you
Mm-hmm.
you can speak up for yourself. You can set that
Yeah.
boundary. I started learning with my clients. I've done it with two of them. So not to say that I've been doing this for 8, but I'm learning. So with two of them, I'm like, okay, did you like this intervention that we did this week versus last week? Would you prefer more time to be talking versus the activities? Like what's working for you? What do you like?
Yeah.
So I made the assumption based on a conversation with a supervisor and a teacher on what a therapy room should look like that, okay, we're going to focus solely on conversation and no activity. And I know that the client likes takeaways, doesn't much likes activities. But I was like, maybe that doesn't have a place in the therapy room all the time. And it was just a conversation. And when I asked, he was like, actually, no. I hated that. He was like, I like that we talk in the beginning and then we do an activity and continue talking. I love the activity part.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm so happy I asked because I made an assumption based on information
Yeah.
and from other people who, of course, have the best interest in heart, and that's how they approach it. And that's totally fine. And it works for their clients and it works for them, and that's amazing. But if I didn't think to ask that, I would have not been really benefiting the client. Coming in every week, I hope that I'm offering you some kind of
Yeah.
right. So being willing to ask and being willing to listen is one of the big things. It's not enough to just ask, not enough to just know. You have to be willing to actually listen and follow through and do what needs to be done. Even when it's uncomfortable for you, because chances are, if it's uncomfortable for you, it's been uncomfortable for other people.
Exactly.
And then switching gears to the family loved one side and friends, I guess my first question would be, how do you begin to create that safe space? Because like you said, some people may have never had it.
So I think for the family aspect is if you're going in with love and not being judgmental, that creates safety. You can read energy. You can know when a room is feeling safe. Because sometimes I'm like, this is a safe space. It's like, that's not really for you to declare, right? We can ask like, hey, I hope this can be safe for you. I'm listening and I'm listening to learn. But I also think like take the effort to go and learn. It's not that person's job to teach you about their life, right? Like, yes, they can give you insight here and there, but they should not be the sole. Now I'm your professor, your SJ, your mentor. Go out. There's books. Google, and when I say Google, I'm gonna add an asterisk. Use proper. Don't just Google anything, right? Like go to resources like GLAD, Trevor Project. Like go on those websites and learn and look at their resource list. There's so many groups here. So like even we have a organization here in Charlotte called Time Out Youth. They have support groups for family members. So like for siblings of LGBTQ plus individuals, parents of LGBTQ, like those experiences. Because even if you also had a friend that brought up, she was talking about grace, and when she came out with her family, and she said, I read a quote that said, well, your family's also coming out too. And what that means is like they're experiencing life for the first time, and so this is their first time with a child that is LGBTQ. And so like having grace for learning bumps, and it's grace to an extent, but having grace, because they're gonna have feelings, or they can, and those feelings are okay. But you can go have those feelings in a support group with other parents and support each other, but don't take that out on your kid. And so have that space to again listen, affirm, but also do your back work of let me go and learn.
Yeah. And with that, and knowing that if you did react wrong in the beginning, you can still go out and use those resources and learn and make a repair. You have to set the tone for the future of that relationship. I had one friend in college who, one of my really good friends, he waited until after he graduated. I was there for the day of graduation when he finally told his parents about his sexuality. And it was like, because if they don't react well, based on like comments and jokes they would make throughout his childhood, if they don't react well, at least I've graduated and I have a job and I can stand on my own 2 feet. And for me, I was like, that must be so terrifying to think that, oh, I'm gonna get cut off just because
Yeah.
a piece of me. That
And that's so many people's story, like that sense of my safety doesn't start unless I know I can 100% take care of myself. And we even have had to have those conversations because sometimes you hear people like, you can come out when you want to. It's okay. And it's like, well, we don't know. When I worked on a college campus, I would tell kids, I don't know your family. You know them best. And so, yes, you may be living loud and proud here on campus. In which you brought up holidays, right? Holidays can be very touchy for people that are queer and they have to go back home. And if they do choose to go home or they don't have a choice, right? College campus closed. So you have to go back home. And so if you're going back to a space or an area that's not safe, then you kind of have to almost half yourself or cut off parts of yourself. I sometimes feel like you might have to do that to survive, right? Like you may want to go in there like I'm going boom, 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 and you are going to accept me, but is it safe to do that? Like, that's a privilege in itself for some people to be able to go and live loud and their family's like, I love you. But some people have to, like you said, I gotta stay quiet until I graduate. Now I got this job, and yeah, then I'm gonna live fully, which is, we don't want that, but survival is also the number one priority.
and that's so important for us to remember as therapists, as friends, to
Hmm.
make sure that other people know their story best. They know their situations and experiences in life best, and being willing to not encourage what you don't know and making sure that you're giving space to ask the right questions because
Hmm.
it's so important. We want people to feel safe and free to be who they are. But like you
Yeah.
said, it's also about survival, making sure that we don't want to add more trauma to the situation.
Yeah.
How can we really learn to ask the right questions and to listen and to not make assumptions on what it should look like and when it should happen? As we are wrapping up, what is one piece of advice you can give to, I guess, I like the theme of the therapist.
Uh-huh.
So, what's the one piece of advice you can give to a new therapist who has never had experience the marginalized community, who comes from the rose-colored glasses,
Hmm.
background experience? How can they begin to create that space in the therapy room, even when they don't know that they don't know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest is, and you kind of alluded to it already, is remove your perspective. And what I mean by that is take the glasses off, which is hard, but I think when you're in that space, allow that person's story to be said without you trying to now filter it with your lens. Because sometimes we will go in and we'll hear it, and we're like, "Oh, I already know how I'm gonna address this," and "Oh, I'm ready to respond to that." Be quiet. Recognize, like you said, everybody's story is different, and just because, like for you, you might say like, "Oh, well, your family they'll love you." You don't know that. And so don't allow your own experience to now cloud how you see someone else's experience. So like open yourself up and recognize like this person is completely different from me. And so I need to extend myself to hear their story and allow their story to fill this room and this space and just listen and learn.
Listen to be present, don't listen to respond.
There it
Very
is.
important. For those listening who want to connect with you, learn more, how can they connect
Yeah.
with you?
Yeah, so you can follow my Instagram page. It's Earl Martin LCSW. I'm also one third of co-host of a talk series called The Grit Call, which stands for Gays Raised in the South. It's all about amplifying the voices of queer individuals raised in the South, particularly queer individuals of color, Black and brown. And so you can follow that at The Grit Call on Instagram. The YouTube is at The Grit Call as well. And you can also reach me or find out more on my website, which is earlmartinlcsw.com.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.